workforce. We will be going through until 2 o'clock. And next slide, please. Just a few issues of housekeeping. We have turned on the closed captioning for you at the bottom of the screen here. You can click on where it says live transcript if you wanted to reduce the size of it or increase the size. We will be making a recording of this webinar, and I'll be sending that out to everybody who's registered. We'll also post it on LinkedIn and elsewhere if you need it. If you'd like to ask questions of our panelists, there is a Q&A facility down the bottom there. Please post your questions, and after we've had some of the SAT questions that we're going to be discussing, we'll then turn to some of the Q&A questions as well. Periodically, a survey will be posted, so please give us your feedback. We'd like to continue to give you good webinars like these well into the future. Next slide, please. So this particular event is put on in conjunction with the Capital Region HR Association. Now, we are also offering in conjunction with them HRCI and PDC professional development credits for the various SHRM certifications. And we will be sending those out afterwards. If you haven't received them, then please do get in touch with me and we'll make sure that you do. Next slide, please. Now, the Capital Region HR Association offers you opportunities for networking, and also they have, most importantly, coming up on May the 4th, their annual conference. So if you want to email them at info@crhra.org, they'll be pleased to give you more information about either getting involved with the CRHRA or attendance at that annual conference. Next slide, please. Now, the online graduate programs here at Albany Law School, we have a number of 100% online programs. We recently launched in January Human Resources Law, Leadership and Policy program. It's offered as a 9-credit certificate, a 30-credit master's, or a 24-credit LLM, and can be completed, or at least the LLM can be completed in as little as 12 months. They're industry focused and they're aligned with SHRM, the Society of Human Resources Management. They're intended to be flexible programs that meet your career needs, and they've been designed and they are taught by current HR industry professionals. If you'd like to know more, please give us a call on 518-443-5260 or email graduateadmissions@albanylaw.edu. Next slide, please. We also offer a health law and compliance graduate program, again, certificate master's LLM, designed to equip those who are employed or seeking employment in healthcare with the knowledge and skills necessary to succeed in this dynamic field. We also, remember, do offer dual degree options because we offer cybersecurity, data privacy, we offer health law and compliance, we offer financial compliance and risk management, and we offer the HR program as well, which can all be offered in a dual degree. Those certificates that I mentioned, they can be completed in as little as 3 months. So you'll see that our contact details down below. If you want to know more, please get in touch. Next slide, please. We do have an application deadline coming up. If you're interested in starting one of our 100% online graduate programs, then the deadline is Monday, May the 17th for the start of the Summer 1 term, which is May the 24th. And at the moment, we are waiving the application fees. So get in touch and we'll be pleased to tell you more. Next slide, please. We've got some more events coming up. Our next event in conjunction with Capital Region HR Association will be Wednesday, May the 12th. A very interesting speaker. Zachary Jones is the VP of Labour Relations at United Airlines, and he's going to be discussing lessons from a lifetime on the front line as a labour negotiator. As I mentioned, Wednesday, May 12th, and that will be 1 o'clock until, it's not 2:30 p.m, it'll actually be 2 p.m. Next slide, please. And another interesting event coming up, we're going to be talking to the FBI about cybersecurity and the FBI, an expert panel discussion. Now that's going to be Wednesday, May the 19th. And the time again there is 1 o'clock till 2. A number of specialists from the local FBI will be talking about some of the latest trends taking place in terms of cybersecurity. That is definitely going to be unmissable. Please do register early so that you can book your place for that one. Next slide, please. So let me introduce you to the panel. The first panelist, Dr. Sharon Jones, joined MassMutual in 2018 as the head of talent management. She leads a talent development learning and development and early and mid-career programs, and also the change management functions. She's based out of MassMutual's HQ in Springfield. And prior to joining MassMutual, she was in a dual role as Vice President, US Head of Talent Management and Global Integration Selection Lead at Bayer Corporation. Prior to Bayer, she supported talent management, organizational development and staffing at Novartis. And there she led a cross-functional team that developed performance management and coaching systems. She created and delivered change management activities and integrated diversity and inclusion efforts into the company's talent management process. And prior to Novartis, she held several positions at Bank of America in the areas of leadership development, talent planning, enterprise learning, and organizational effectiveness. Next slide. And our next panelist will be known to many of you locally, Rose Miller. Rose is president of Pinnacle Human Resources. She's a nationally certified, the business is nationally certified women business located in Albany and Syracuse. She's a human resource professional for over 25 years, enjoys helping companies find solutions that improve HR delivery systems. She's frequently requested speaker, both locally and nationally, and she's also the author of the monthly column Work Matters for the Albany Times Union. She has a growing audience following her podcast series, The Thorn in Rose's Side, and a staff of over 20 HR professionals offer on-site or off-site HR support models, HR audits, employee handbooks, managerial training, executive coaching, HRMS implementation services, leave management services, organizational development plans, performance and compensation systems, and assistance with merger and acquisitions. Rose, welcome to you. Next slide, please. And we're also very honored to have Michael ONeill with us. Michael is Chief Human Resources Officer at the Major League Baseball Players Association located in New York City. He's more than 20 years of HR and admin experience in a variety of industries. And prior to his current position, he was CHRO of Wilson Elsa, a national law firm, and was a senior managing director and head of global corporate services and global administration at Guggenheim Partners. Michael joined Guggenheim in 2006, and prior to that, he was director of human resources and administration in the technology, private equity, and legal industries for over 10 years. He's experienced teaching HR and finance-related classes as an online adjunct professor at both Villanova and Penn State, and Michael received a BS in accounting from Johns University and a JG from New York Law School. He was admitted to the New York and New Jersey Bar Associations and practiced law prior to starting his career in HR. Welcome to you, Michael. And your moderator today is Chris Wessel. Now, Chris is a certified talent optimization consultant, applying his knowledge of the framework and 17 years in talent acquisition to help clients determine job requirements, identify the best candidates, understand team dynamics, analyze people and data, and elevate employees to the top of their game. He's recruited top talent for organizations across a broad range of industry verticals since 2004. He's also consulted on recruitment processes, trained and developed recruiting teams, conducted hundreds of behavioral assessments, and helped companies select and implement the best software for their recruiting needs. He has worked for both local and national recruiting firms, owned and managed firms for 12 years, and is a frequent speaker and panelist on the topic of talent acquisition and retention. He's been a director of the Capital Region chapter of SHRM since 2008, serving as president from 2016 to 2018. Please join me in welcoming Chris Wessel and the panel who will be discussing the topic today.
Hey, Will, looks like the host has stopped my video. Ah, there we go. Thank you very much. Hey, everyone. Hope you're having a good afternoon so far. Really think we have a great conversation planned. Fellow panelists and I, we had a kind of a prep session last week, and we got going on so many topics that we're like, gosh, we better save some of these for the panel because we got into some really good stuff. So welcome, everyone. And what I want to start off with is, what is talent management? So each of us will kind of weigh in on that, because that, sounds like a nice term. What does that mean? My take on that, when I think talent management, I think in terms of a more holistic view of recruiting and retention, inclusive of the events between those 2 points, like onboarding, training, developing, motivating. And as far as, current events go, more important than ever, because with resources needing to be redeployed in ways that companies and employees have not been accustomed to, we need to make sure that resources stay aligned with evolving business needs while also taking into account employee experience. My fellow panelists, who wants to jump in next with their take on talent management? Sharon, how about you?
Yeah, sure. I think, I love what you said, which is in everything in between, because for me, what I was kind of mulling on as you were talking about is it's all of those things. And I think particularly now the engagement is such a huge piece in organizations. If we think about how that happens, and I know we're going to get into more detail later when we talk about being remote and how that's changed the game from a talent perspective. But I think it's the kind of pre, during, and post activities, because you can get talent into an organization, but if you're not managing that talent, if you're not doing all those extra pieces, you're not going to maintain and keep that talent, retain it in your organization.
Yeah, I would add that many times they don't have a strong orientation. And to Sharon's point, when they get there, you spent all this time and energy and money, you did all the right things to isolate the right talent, and then there is nothing acclimating them. And I think it's a missed opportunity. I call it a bonding moment that you totally did not capture.
Yeah, we definitely have to make, kind of echo what everyone else said, but I think we definitely have to pay attention to that piece of retaining our employees, because, kind of as Rose said, we end up bringing people in, and we're bringing in the best talent that we could possibly bring in. Well, we want to keep and maintain that talent. So talent management becomes a very important focus of what we do.
So speaking of bringing talent in, our first topic we'll touch on is talent acquisition, kind of the beginning of the talent management process. So how has the pandemic influenced talent acquisition, in terms of drawing from a wider talent pool, in terms of the challenges that come with that? Rose, what are your thoughts?
Great question, because it has had a significant impact. But before I get into what the employer, how changes for the employer, first I wanted to at least mention how it's impacted the employee and the job seeker. The pandemic has had an extraordinary impact on women in general, the caregivers of the nation, and what was already a short labor pool has become even shorter if we don't address their needs and continue to have some flexibility and support the families. And because they don't even get to do some of the workforce development initiatives that are out there to gain more skills because of their work-life situations. But on the employer side, there's some really good news, because as we gravitate towards remote working situations, and for many organizations, that's become a permanent decision to have their remote workers. We used to rely on, just our local network of talent. And the really great news is you can widen your net. Do they have to be, if I'm looking for people in Albany, does it really matter if they live in Albany? They don't have to travel. So now I can search for talent everywhere. So that is really good news. And that is a good side effect of what has transitioned during the pandemic.
And I build on that, Rose, to say, and this is Sharon, to say, it's great that we can go broader to find that talent, but then it also creates more opportunity where we have to be really intentional, because finding that talent, some of that diverse talent that people are struggling to find or discussing where they're going to find that talent, if you're in markets where you don't have or see a lot of that and know that there's other spaces and places where there's more readily available diverse talent, if we kind of bring them in, then the intentionality around the onboarding, the intentionality on if we're going to stay hybrid or remote, what does that mean in ways in which we have to engage? And so using a lot of the lessons that I think we've learned from being in the pandemic and working in the pandemic in terms of how do we network, how do we connect, you know, how do we, it's not just a walk by Starbucks in the building. It's being really intentional about the way in which we're doing that as we're attracting talent to our organizations, but also retaining it once it's here.
I think also there's some opportunities for people with disabilities and other issues that present themselves here. That, you know, especially there are situations where people can't travel to work or do the daily commute, or even in situations where they're more comfortable in their home. And these are really an untapped resource that I think we could look into.
And I think that, you know, there's some challenges in terms of the increased competition for talent that comes with that broadened scope, right? So now anyone, we can target anyone theoretically in a lot of cases, but those anyone's are being targeted by everyone. So we now, you know, now you're potentially, you know, not the only game in town when it comes to recruiting. So being able to differentiate yourself and really having a good handle, as Sharon said, on how you onboard and how you manage your culture and everything is a big differentiator that someone's going to want to join your remote team over everyone else that's calling them. Another thing I thought was kind of interesting about the dynamic that's influencing talent acquisition pools is, you know, we've got an increasingly migrant workforce. Not everyone, but a lot of people are more open to moving based on lifestyle than where the work is, right? Traditionally, you would move to a place where there's a good employer base for your skill set, but now a lot of people, especially knowledge workers, have the ability to kind of live where they choose, you know, what makes them happy. With that, I mean, you have hundreds of thousands of people leaving, according to, you know, Postal Service change of address data, leaving major cities. New York City, more people left New York City last year than the 2 years prior combined. So people are willing to move for a job. So if you have a role that requires a relocation, you may find people more open to relocating than maybe we have in years past. And potentially, in certain circumstances, the trailing spouse who also needs to find work may be able to work remotely and may not hurt their career to go move to where your opportunity is. So I think that for the many on-site roles that remain, we may see more flexibility in people that are willing to relocate for the right opportunity.
Yep, I'm hearing that the job seeker or the employees are asking the employer as one of their questions, what's your flexibility schedule? What's your remote work policy? And that's pretty new. And the employer should have their ducks in a row and be ready for those questions.
Well, and speaking of Rose, sorry, go right ahead.
I was just going to build on what Rose was going to say and say, you know, in the past it was that those were things that were differentiating us in the marketplace, right? If you had more flexible work environments and people were saying, you know, I describe it as, you know, one company says we have a ping pong table, another says we have a pool table, another says we have a pool, right? Those were things that differentiated us in the past. Today, those are expectations. And so you said it really nicely, Chris, when you were saying it's all about the culture, then the brand, you know, the employer brand that people want to connect to the organization. And some of those things that were the differentiators of yesteryear, kind of post-pandemic, are not going to be those things that are going to retain people in the organization. It's going to be that flexibility, being able to work, you know, in different spaces and places. And I think, as you said, thinking about the family dynamics. You know, people are saying, yeah, I have to work more now, but I get to be home and have dinner with my family every night. So maybe I'm willing to have more flexible schedule, but I get to spend that time with my family. Post-pandemic, I now still want to maintain that dynamic with my family every night. So how are you, company, going to flex for me? And what optionality do I have? And they're going to be expecting that, I think, in the go forward.
Definitely. And speaking of the home dynamic, hopefully it's not coming through in my headset, but one of those things you can't plan for, but right now the ice cream man has decided to stop directly in front of my home office, and it's decided that this is the spot where all the kids in the neighborhood are going to run to. So hopefully the fact that I'm using a headset tunes some of that out. So speaking of managers being accommodating to employees' needs, to what extent has that transition required a mind shift on the part of management or managers in general? And are there industries that perhaps have adapted better than others? Michael, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we saw that for the most part, no one was ready for this, and I don't know how anyone could be ready for this, right? So I think that's the way we had to fundamentally change, and I think managers had to get used to the work being done, sort of remotely, maybe not being able to manage, and in some cases micromanage their employees, and that's led to a little bit of trust issues where we've seen in a Harvard Business Review survey that went out, about 40% of managers really feel like they can't manage their employees remotely or not capable of managing them. So that's a relatively high number, but I would imagine it's much lower or maybe coming down from what it used to be. And I think we've seen that the industries that have really thrived in this environment are ones that were online essentially. They're innovative and they're nimble organizations. So, we've seen business services, obviously, like Zoom and other video conferencing companies kind of really do well. Consumer goods have obviously done well. Technology, and obviously the big one is comfortable clothing, because no one dresses up anymore except for weather.
Anyone else have thoughts on that? Rose, Sharon?
Yeah, I think from a managerial perspective, again, some of it goes to the intentionality. Managers are having to think differently about, how do I do those? How do I connect people? Am I that connector manager because I can't do it all? And how do I do that when it's not as easy as it was in the office? We had virtual summer interns last summer. Had to pivot that quickly because it wasn't the original intent. And when we did that, one of the things that we found was what we were hearing from the young people coming into the workforce from a manager's perspective was they were saying, they had to, it was intentional. We had these kind of one-on-ones, but they weren't over my shoulder all the time. And I think that's what, Michael was talking about. They didn't micromanage me. They let me kind of have a leeway, but I knew when to connect with them, when to get kind of dialed in. And the fact that I could see that they were normal people is what we heard. And I think often as managers, people don't look at us as normal people. I'm not sure why, but in those kind of leadership roles, they don't know that we do the same thing. If the ice cream truck shows up or, that things happen. And so to be able to see people in this kind of casual environment, not always, dressed up and having things happen in real time, I think starts to make some of that difference.
That intentional, sorry, go ahead, Rose.
I was only going to add that I've really seen this all heighten how we've had a lack of managerial training. And I always say the manager was lousy face to face. You can imagine how they are remote, right? And they have had they have nothing in their toolkits. They've received no managerial training. They've either become managers through attrition or somebody just said, you're a manager today. And it's all glaringly obvious when we have, we're put under pressure to measure people, to see if they're working, communicate more frequently. It's all coming to bear.
Yeah, and I think, gosh, you said something that really struck me, which was, managerial support. And I think in times of crisis or when dollars are short, the first thing people typically think about doing is dropping learning and training or minimizing it. And it's almost that time you have to double down. In times like this, you've just got to double down on the training, on the learning, use that as the opportunity. I mean, what we've been doing is spending a lot of time over investing in our managerial population because they touch obviously the most amount of people in our org. And we found that to be really successful.
And I'm also going to, just based on the way some of the answers evolve, I'm going to jump around some of our prepared questions. So I hope I don't throw our panelists off too much when I hop around our numbered questions. But I want to kind of go with the flow of what we're talking about. So how do you lead remote talent differently? And do you think that some of these practices will be extended? I know, like, for example, Rose was talking about manager training, and you know, I'm sure we all know that a lot of companies aren't exactly knocking it out of the park in terms of management training to start with. And now we have these extraordinary circumstances on top of it. How do you lead remote talent differently? Rose, do you want to start off with that?
Sure, I always like to start with the top, the senior management of the company, because to lead, you have to set the tone. And very important now that you may have a scattered workforce, that the leader of the organization is very clear and communicates what kind of culture is supporting those behaviors that underscore the culture. Really make it clear what are the values, what are the and they're really positive about it. They have to stay positive because people are disconnected, and they really have to give them a vision of what the end game looks like. And it's really important for anyone that's leading to know that culture isn't held between all the walls. It's all about your people, and it's about leading them and showing how and rewarding behaviors that are in a desired way. We're also seeing a lot of operational and employee management issues bubbling up from having a remote workplace. We see that managers need to create more structure, create agendas, a lot more frequent touches to their departments and critical employees. Really learn how to measure people with measurable outcomes, because they no longer can measure them by how many hours they sit in a chair. That was many times how a manager measured someone. So that's no longer available. They really have to start rethinking, re-engineering everything that they've done, because chances are they really based all of those processes and procedures on premises. So it's really to be rethought of. They need to, the technology has to be really good. They have to have reliable technology. They have to not assume everyone's technically competent. You know, teach your employees how to take the cat filter off the Zoom. You know, just don't assume. Have expectations. Have even Zoom etiquette laid out and a new policy for that. You know, there's so many changes. But from the employee side, what we're also bubbling up is concerns about how do they keep their careers on track? How do they get known that they want to have more? You know, so again, re-engineering all the things that they happen because they may have to be tweaked, or even a new process to how do you identify the talent, new measurable ways to have, you know, they may have to reinvent a way to measure the outcomes, because that's all we have. We have to have the what is at the end of the day the deliverable, and how do you communicate that, and how do you measure that? You know, but at the end of the day, what I have found is that even with the remote workers and the current workers, what is the same is what employees have always wanted and what they will continue to want. And what they want is they want to know they're on a winning team. They want to be heard. They want to be treated fairly. They want the a-holes to be dealt with. They want some flexibility, and they want to be proud of what they do. That's what they've always wanted. So we have to maintain those things, whether they're on premises or remote.
I would throw in just, I mean, everything Rose said is just so on point, but I would throw in that we have to start teaching some people skills as well. You know, it's a little bit easier to have those skills when you're in the office and, you know, you're seeing a person in their, you know, in person, so to speak, but there's a certain skill to talking to them on the phone or via video, because you don't know what they're doing at that exact moment when you call, and you can't always schedule time. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on in houses right now that didn't go on pre-pandemic, right? And a lot of a lot of things that have changed. So yeah, people skills, and I'll reinforce that measurements and outcomes is so important. Just not thinking a person has worked their 8 hours or 9 hours or whatever the day is, that it's important that we measure things on what needs to be done and the outcome of that work. And managers have to have empathy, because not every day is easy for every single employee. So they have to understand that there are some rough days, and they have to be able to work through those days.
Right, and the challenge is to do that balancing act. You want to be flexible. There is a greater ability to be flexible and work later or in the mornings or whatever, but managers still have to keep people accountable. You can't be so flexible and you forget that we are here for a business reason or organizational mission, and we do have to balance that with communicating, I'm still going to keep you accountable for the work that you're supposed to be performing.
And that flexibility that Rose mentioned, I think it needs to be fair and consistently applied. So you can't favor, you don't want to get into a situation where someone who say doesn't have kids is like, oh, this one's got kids, so they get more flexibility. Everybody needs flexibility in different ways. So, just like any other practice, management practice, it has to be consistency in how that's applied. And in order to do that better, you really need to, as a manager, I think, make the effort to find out about the individual circumstances of the people on your team, and really just not make assumptions, because everyone's got different things going on. Everybody's got very different situations, and you got to understand your people in order to lead them and in order to guide them towards the outcomes that Rose and Michael have described. And kind of going back to a point Sharon made too, and I think Rose mentioned as well, that like the consistent interactions, they have to be intentional. They can't be accidental. So there has to be some, you have to thoughtfully construct that as a manager and figure out, how do I have these people regularly in touch with each other and in touch with me, and don't just rely on the convention of we used to be in the office, so I would just see them every morning, Did anyone else have any other thoughts on that particular topic?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is, in the go forward, it's always now going to be hybrid. We're not going to go back to a situation where it's, half and half. Where it's all in person or all, remote. When we go back, it's going to be hybrid. And so a manager has to learn how to manage both. And I think that gets to what you were talking about, Chris, and making sure that we don't kind of get into this rut of bias, because the bias comes to the person that I see every day versus the person that I don't see. And, how am I managing and being fair in my practices and how I do that?
And little biases too, like, for example, one best practice I've seen come up a lot, I've seen in a couple articles, I've seen it in practice in a few organizations, is when you have people offsite and people in the office, and you have a team meeting, if there's 5 or 6 people in the office, have them sit in their offices separately and all join Zoom together. Don't have a conference room with like 10 people in it and then 15 other people join it and then all feel kind of left out because they're not really in the room where everything's happening. Like little things like that make a big difference. And I've seen it play out. I've seen my wife joins remotely from to a meeting that she couldn't make in person, and there's like 20 people in a conference room. And then there's several people that are just kind of on the periphery on their Zoom, just kind of like, hey, we're here too. That we talked a little about the 40-hour work week, the construct that exists, the hours that, now we're looking at like outcomes more of that. How do you think that's going to change as a result of all this? Yes, we have to be more outcome focused, and we have to think about our attitudes in terms of when people are working and whether they are working. Sharon, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about some of this earlier when we were saying that, how people work is going to change. Some of that today is I have to take that break at lunch because, I need to help my kids with schoolwork because they're still at home. The other is kind of as we move into the go forward, maybe kids are in school, but people still need that flexibility. So will that affect the 9 to 5 or the 8 to 5? I think it's going to depend. I think if you're talking about overtime eligible and hourly workers, you know, we have to kind of think about how that works. Some people haven't been working, so they're going to go back to their 9 to 5. I think when you think about corporate America, when you think about education, have we really ever been working a 9 to 5? I think we've been working, you know, whatever hours make that work. If we're in a global environment, you know, we've been chasing the sun. If you're working kind of in a more regional or local environment that's the same time zone, you do what you need to do to get the job done. And I think Rose, I think we're all talking about this kind of outcomes-based approach in the go forward. I think is going to become much more in the forefront of the work that we do. And it's going to be outcomes-based with a lot more flexibility, whether that's by timing, you know, day of the hour when you're working, or by location. I think both of those things are going to play in the future.
Yeah, I would say, you know, just to add to that, all correct. And I think communication is going to be very important. You know, we were talking before about potentially having, you know, certainly nationally or globally, the ability to attract and retain talent, right? And they're going to be working on different time zones at times, right? Or there's going to be needs between that 9 to 5 hour where 12 to 2, I can't be available, but I could be available 7 to 9 at night or something. And so communications with managers and managers' ability and willingness to recognize that the work is getting done and the outcome is still positive.
And I think whether you're saying whether that work is with other people where I need to collaborate, or if it's something that I need to do on my own. And I think that's also going to get to, you know, what's the purpose of an office? And if I need to do something quietly, is the office the best place to do that? If I want to collaborate, you know, what's the best way to do that? So I think we're going to start to get into what's the work that has to get done and what's the best way to do that work. And that may dictate where you are and where you need to be.
Yeah, we're getting into a little bit.
Well,
Sorry,
go ahead.
We're going to get into a little bit of a strange situation too. I think where they're going to be, there already is, but there's going to be programs that say we're online or offline, and we'll be able to kind of collaborate that way. But that does get into a little bit of you know, people's privacy, et cetera, where I think that they'll feel a bit uncomfortable in certain respects. Maybe we'll grow to be okay with it, but it's more about the changes that are going to happen in the workplace, and we'll see what happens in a couple of years.
So what are some of the factors that influence, I'm sure a lot of people who are on this call are curious about this as they're facing this in their own organizations, influencing the decisions on which employees are in the office, who should be remote, who should be in the office, the timing of, you know, should we have, you know, certain individuals home? So we have teams in and out of the office. How should that all flow? What are your thoughts on that? Because I'm sure that's something that's very close to home for a lot of people watching this. Sharon, you've got the biggest smile. You look like you want to go first.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. I mean, this is the $1 million question, right? Because we're not back in the office, but we spend so much time talking about this because if you get to this thing where you say, well, we're going to let people choose, what happens if everybody comes in on the same day? If part of it was around flexibility and part of it was around we don't want as many people in the office, we kind of have to decide, again, and it goes back to what's the purpose of the office? You know, employers might say it's about productivity and space to meet with clients and collaboration, culture. You know, employees are like, look, I need to get my computer fixed, I'm coming in the office, or I need to collaborate with somebody. I want to network, and I feel like I can do that. Again, we were talking about intentional versus kind of happenstance. I think both work. And so I think people have different needs for why they want to come back to the office. And so I think that's what the organizations, you know, are struggling with. At least, you know, I have a lot of contact with other talent heads, and part of that is, are we going to let employees, managers decide? Are we going to, you know, make that kind of call as an organization? And we're getting into this discussion about what do we want? You know, are we moving away from rule-based and more to kind of principle-based decision-making? And if so, how does that drive this decision that we're, you know, going to have to? So we've been looking at kind of what is the industry doing and kind of who's saying we're going to come back to an office and who's saying we're not, and does that hold true? You know, we're probably going to be laggards in the industry in terms of coming back and just kind of wait and see how things work out, because we know what we have today is working. We know there'll be another change, and I think we were talking about this earlier as well. this kind of concept of people have figured out now how to make this work. When we go back to the office, it's going to be a huge change again. And, it shakes up the dynamics of how we make that work. And you were saying, Chris, gosh, if your wife has to join a call and she's on the phone and everybody else is in the room, the other flip side of that is people say, well, if we're going to just join by Zoom at my desk anyway, then I might as well stay home. Because that person that's at home saved 2 hours because they didn't have to drive an hour to work and an hour home, which they could use to take training, which they could use to network, which they could use to do other things. So it's almost one of these things where it's like, for why are we saying we're coming back? What are we saying the culture of the organization is? And what are we hearing, going back to the first part of this conversation, from a attraction perspective? What are we hearing that those coming into the market or wanting to come into whatever organization that is, what are they looking for? And what kind of flexibility are they looking to have and why? Yeah, because that's going to impact, I'll just say one other point, and that's going to impact pay. Because if you can work from anywhere and we pay you more to work in Boston than we do in Atlanta, Georgia, right? Then if you're going to work anywhere, how does that work now? What do I have to factor in? How do we think about that? So there's like all these questions that are, playing out. If we say we're a national company, not internationally, and people want to live in Brazil, they'll work US hours, no problem. Do we let them work from Brazil?
Exactly.
What about that? What are the tax implications? I know we have a lot of probably lawyers on the call, but that's one of those things that we have to play with. Rose?
Oh yeah, that you were a one state employer, and all of a sudden you're multi-state employer. It's going to be on a permanent nature. That's the trick. Finding out, is this, you just go to Florida for the winter, or are you coming back? Like, where is your residence? Because that's going to be extremely important to determine whether you're going to now have a New Jersey employee or a Florida employee or a Texas employee when you thought all your employees were in New York. So that has been a real issue for employers that are going to be trapped into not being in compliance with laws and are they adhering to the leave mandates in that state? So that's been a real problem for employers with the remote workers.
Yeah, I think one thing is also thinking about pay equity and sort of normalizing that. And I'm not sure how we're going to do it if we start taking cost of living into the equation, because it's just we're going to have to become economists in a way to try and figure out what the cost of living is somewhere and equalizing that for different genders, and it's messy for sure.
I know
comp analysis. The comp analysis aspect of it is anybody who's a comp analysis, anyone who's doing that for work right now is thinking, oh no, my job is about to get a lot harder.
I know we were asked by a DC client that had factor in a lot of the costs of working in DC, the parking and everything, factor it in. And now they have this entire group that is remote. And their question was, can we reduce their wages? Because they no longer have these expenses, DC expenses. Right? So yeah, we're going,
Reducing wages always goes over well, I found. So yeah, it's always an easy conversation. Everyone loves it.
Right. But it is.
So another, I want to make sure we have enough time to cover this one too, and there's really good Q&A coming in as well. A big elephant in the room that we've all seen as a result of this on LinkedIn posts, Facebook posts, all over the place is mental health has been brought to the forefront more than ever before. And companies are trying to find ways to address that, some in more meaningful ways than others. How important of a factor is that, and how do you leverage the relative importance of mental health as an advantage for your organization to attract people and retain them? Michael, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've seen during, certainly at the start and throughout the pandemic, sort of unprecedented levels of stress in our workforce, and I think that still continues. I think for the parents out there who are teaching their children from home and trying to go through work at the same time, it's extremely difficult. And so I think that really kind of brings us to potential solutions that revolve around benefits. And you know, we have to think about childcare benefits in a certain way, and that could help our workforce as well. But certainly things like EAPs are important, as well as better mental health benefits within our insurance coverages. And then sort of lastly, the buzzword has been around forever, but wellness programs. We have to start thinking about wellness programs and how they relate to our business in particular, and ones that could strategically work best for us. Is that gym memberships or some other kind of stress relievers? And we have to really work on adding those benefits and making sure that our employees have access, but we encourage them as well to use them.
Right. And I would add on to that, you can't use a cookie cutter approach with people. You know, people function differently under different circumstances. You know, data is showing that many people are, you know, working remote and very productive, functional. But there's a whole camp out there that the lack of structure, the lack of having some place to go has totally impacted them negatively. They're falling apart. You know, ask a major caregiver, they'll say they went to work to rest. So, you know, there's all kinds of dynamics, and that's, I think Sharon touched upon the hybrid approach is the way to go, you know, to look at your population and is it working? What is working? That's the employee side. The only other side is the customer. You do have a business or a mission, and why you would have remote versus on premises may be determined by what is the deliverable of that organization. It may not be possible to not be on premises because they can't do what they have to do as a business. So there's both of those things going on at the same time.
Yeah, and I think the well-being side, the last piece I would add is the mental health and the well-being. I think all those things were going on pre-pandemic. I think we've had insight into them now in a different way than we perhaps did previously. So it goes back to kind of that managerial piece and really knowing, you know, kind of the individuals in your organization. But I have to say, as horrible as the pandemic has been, there's also things about it that have brought teams together. So that have, I think in some ways, that have helped with some of that. So checking in on people more, asking, are you okay? You know, seeing kind of how people can kind of pitch in and help, and, you know, allowing individuals to take care of the things that they need to take care of. I don't have young children at home, but I had 2 teenagers, which means they're over the age of 80, living with me, but I call them my teenagers because they acted a lot like teenagers. And, you know, that was just a whole nother beast and dynamic. You know, they weren't going to go down for their nap. And so I think we start to think about the dynamics in which people have to work in, you know, whether it's children, whether it's elder care, whether it's being that sandwich, you've got both, you know, kind of in your household. And you don't know what people are doing at home. You're getting to see more insight into that. But having compassion, I think somebody on this call said it earlier, empathy, compassion, thinking about people as individuals, I just think becomes so much more critical when we talk about why people join organizations, why people stay with organizations, you know, and the way in which we treat each other and people, I think becomes just critical for the go forward.
Right, and I think it's an opportunity for HR to shine. They can lead this. You know, they are supposed to be taking care of the people side of the business. They look at the business from the people lens. So, you know, being more proactive, developing programs for their employees, you know, having pop-ups where they can, you know, you're not waiting for them. You don't have an office that they're going to come visit and knock on the door and say, can I speak to you? You know, be out there, get out there more, become more visible, and put in programs where employees and managers easily can approach you and you can assist in being, you know, the wellness program or the EAP or whatever you have to help them get through this period, get them back to work.
Yeah, and so that, you know, HR as a resource for these managers that don't know what they should be doing, that don't know that those individual personal connections, like, you know, so we, on a question related to mental health, Sharon pivoted it back to management, because really that's, you know, and it all comes together there, right? If you think about the retention, if you have a good, if your manager understands you and understands your situation and understands your needs, and you trust them and they trust you, then you're going to have a better relationship. There's a pretty good chance that person will actually want to stay there and not feel disconnected. But as we know, you know, a lot of the folks on this call are in HR, and they know that managers need training. And again, like I said earlier, managers need training under normal circumstances or previous circumstances. I guess you can't say normal anymore at this point. And now they need it more than ever. So HR can really add a lot of value by bringing like tools and showing managers, hey, here's what you can do. Let me help you create like a framework for this. Because, you know, when I think about mental health, initially, a lot of us think about things like, oh, there's mindfulness apps that the company can offer a discount on, and we'll have telehealth therapy sessions, and those I think are great. But that stuff does not matter if you do not have a connection with your employee, right?
Yeah, I think that's true, and we're living a lot in the snackable age as well. So we're trying to do things that, you know, in the flow of work, and that could be little bite-sized things that can happen, so people aren't kind of getting overwhelmed. Because what we also hear is people don't have enough time, and now we've added more things onto the plate because they're, you know, trying to school from home and, you know, make all of these other things happen that in the past they could compartmentalize a little bit more. And so I think finding those opportunities, and, you know, we're finding it's the little things, right? It's having a happy hour once a month virtually, you know, which I like to say, it's open bar. Yeah. So, that's my joke. We also like to say, you know, having a walk and talk. So if the weather's nice, we don't have to look at each other. We see each other every day, typically on screen. So we'll both go out, my employee and I, and we'll do our one-on-one while we're walking. So we'll just look for these kind of moments. We have one call a week for half an hour where we can't talk about work. You can join if you want, you don't have to, but finding these little opportunities to connect with people, and keep things kind of making sure they know that you're out there, making sure they care, but it doesn't have to be this full-blown program all the time. It's just these little points and inflection points for people to understand that there's trust, that you care, you know, that you're driving kind of the way in which you do your work, and you're out there when we don't see you every day. I think that's important.
Yeah, and Sharon, like back to one of your points, and it's been a pretty pervasive point, is that has to be planned, and it has to be intentional, and it has to be consistent, and it can't just be, you know, sporadic. In a lot of ways, you got to kind of become like a salesperson who has clients and say, okay, I have touch points. I have to make sure I'm checking in, make sure that, you know, that things are going well, that kind of thing. And another thing too, as far as the empathy that was brought up earlier, and wanting to understand everybody's individual situations, I think all of us at this point have seen on Zoom calls that, you know, inequality is on display, right? You know, home environments are very different, and, you know, some empathy for not just the situation of, you know, I got a kid running around in the background, or my dog won't stop barking at everything that drives by, but not everybody has the luxury of a completely separate room in their house to be set up as a home office. Not everybody has the luxury of, you know, and not every company has the luxury of providing employees with a, you know, hey, here's, you know, some companies, great. They're like, hey, we'll reimburse you up to $2,000 to set up your home office or whatever. That's not the case for a lot of businesses. And, you know, people are trying to conduct work and have calls at their kitchen table, and, you know, and maybe their house is, you know, not as nice as some other people's houses. And, you know, we can mask that a little bit at work, but now everybody's kind of got a window into our lives. And so just that empathy that I think it was Michael that brought it up earlier initially, is another aspect that, again, keeps coming back to, I think, a recurring point here, which is just really on the managers to build a connection. So I'm going to take a look too at some of these questions that we got coming through, because we're not going to be able to address them all, but we definitely want to try to touch on a couple. So some of them are some common questions. One of them is actually, I haven't seen asked yet. I haven't really seen pop up on any articles or anything like that is, you know, are hiring managers thinking about the possibilities that remote talent might not stick around for the long haul? Now that's interesting because I haven't really heard that perspective before, but does anybody have any thoughts on that? Is remote talent, are they going to stick around?
Mike, this is Sharon. I would say, is any talent going to stick around, and how are we thinking about all the talent?
Yeah.
I think remote is one piece, but I think we need to be thinking just as actively about the people in the office, because now everybody's realizing if we can be remote as an option, everybody's on the table, not just the people that are remote. So we've always kind of got to be thinking about that talent in a way that, you know, again, money only gets you so far. So what are the other ways in which we're connecting people to organizations? I think is crucial in the way that we do the work.
It really comes down to that connecting, yeah. Another interesting one that just popped up that I'm sure we all deal with and we all see, employees that don't want to turn their cameras on. How do you get them to participate without fatiguing them at the same time? And does anybody have any thoughts on that, and how you dealt with that in your organizations in these last few minutes?
Well, I go back to that where I say the Zoom etiquette rules, you know, tell them ahead of time, what is the expectation? What are the things, you know, this is the equivalent of coming in my office and having a meeting. If you washed your face and comb your hair before, you're expected to do that on a Zoom meeting too, because we're having a meeting, right? It's replacement of what we were doing before. So, and so I set the expectation, because I was finding that even with my staff, you know, we were having more frequent meetings, and they all said that was so good for them that we were talking more often. But we had quite a few people with the cameras off, and I approached each one by one, and I said it's very important, because it's been proven to aid to a Zoom fatigue. When you need visuals, you need the face recognition. So I said, you have to, if your team meetings, you have to have your camera on. We need to see you. We need you to participate. We need to see your face.
Yeah, my favorite is really the ones where the camera is pointed up to the ceiling. So I'm not exactly sure what that's supposed to do, but yeah, no, I can tell you that just in multiple organizations now, for me, handling that has been very difficult. There's just so many reasons. In a certain respect, I think they would never have a problem with being in person. So it's almost like if they didn't see themselves on camera, it would be better off. If there was an option in Zoom that allowed you to turn off your own view, I think you'd be more comfortable in a certain sense.
Yeah. So, Sharon, did you want to jump in on that at all? Or? Okay, sorry. So, wanting to be respectful of everybody's time, there are numerous things on our kind of little script that we didn't get a chance to get to, and there's a bunch of questions in the chat that all deserve attention, but we should have time to address them. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, the hundreds of you that are watching. Thank you, Rose, Sharon, Michael, for taking time out of your day. Thank you to the staff of Albany Law for including all of us in this discussion. Do note that there's, be sure to take the survey that Will had mentioned earlier, as well as, let's see, just making sure I don't miss anything for my wrap up here, sorry. So make sure you fill out the survey. Thank you on behalf of everyone here, on behalf of Albany Law School. And Tom, I think you're the one hosting. Do you want to close things out? Or how do you want to wrap up?
Thank you, Chris.
I think you're driving.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for moderating today's talk. Yeah, so the online graduate program team at the law school, thanks everybody for coming. And we hope you'll get on our mailing list so you can get the chance to join our future webinars. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.